Level 1, the Errand Boy. You are 16 years old in Seville, and your job is simple. Carry papers. Not just any papers. Sealed papers. Orders, summonses, inventories, witness notes, requests for copies, records of testimony, all stamped and tied with cord. You carry them from one room to another inside the tribunal house near the cathedral district, where the stone walls stay cool even in the heat, and every corridor seems to swallow sound. You are nobody important. That is exactly why they gave you the job. You do not sit in meetings. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not ask what the papers mean. You deliver them to the correct desk, bow your head, and leave. The clerks around you are older, sharper, always writing, always counting, always comparing names. The notary in the corner has ink on his fingers even before sunrise. The door to the inner chamber stays shut most of the day, and you are told never to touch it. But you notice things. You notice that men who come in cheerful leave silent. You notice that some are local tradesmen, some are priests, some are conversos, some are simply unlucky enough to be connected to a rumor. Outside, Seville is alive with ships, merchants, and the scent of the Guadalquivir. Inside, everything is paper, seal wax, and memory. You begin to understand that in this city, authority wears a robe, carries a ledger, and speaks softly. Level 2, the Registrar. At 24, you are trusted with the archives. This is not glory, it is responsibility. The records room is narrow, dry, and packed with drawers, ledgers, and bundles tied in faded cord. Some files concern ordinary disputes. Others concern doctrines, suspected reading habits, private confessions, reconciliations, and cases that have already lasted longer than the accused can bear. You spend your days indexing names, cross-checking statements, and matching one testimony against another. You begin to see patterns. A case does not appear out of nowhere. It develops. First, a rumor. Then, a warning. Then, a private conversation. Then, a witness. Then, a summons. Then, an inquiry. Then, the formal procedure. Nothing is rushed. The court believes a soul should not be judged in haste. That does not make the work easy. Sometimes the accused is obviously confused rather than malicious. Sometimes the witnesses disagree because they are frightened. Sometimes a family is split down the middle by one person's words. Sometimes the evidence is thin, and the judges must decide whether silence means guilt or caution. The job of the registrar is to keep the facts intact while others debate what the facts mean. Level 3, the messenger. At 29, you are given a horse. It is a hard little animal, brown and stubborn, suited for roads more than ceremony. Your job is to carry orders into the countryside, to Carmona, to Écija, to Jerez, sometimes farther if the case requires it. The tribunal's reach is not limited to the city walls. It extends into villages where the people know the priest better than they know the law. Now you see the wider world. You travel through olive groves, over dusty roads, through whitewashed towns where everyone knows who visited whom and who said what at supper. You bring summonses. You collect written statements. You escort men and women who must answer before the tribunal. Sometimes they come willingly. Sometimes they do not. Sometimes they are terrified before they understand why. Your job is to get them to Seville safely and without disorder. You learn quickly that the Inquisition was not only a court, it was also a system of restraint. The paperwork matters because it prevents rash action. The escort matters because it prevents mobs. The formal process matters because it forces accusation to meet procedure. That does not make everyone happy. It makes the institution powerful in a very specific way. It insists that even fear must enter through the door of law. Level 4, the familiar. At 35, you are no longer only carrying papers. You are carrying authority. A familiar is a lay assistant attached to the tribunal, trusted to help with escorts, notices, surveillance, and local coordination. The work is plain, but the name gives you standing. In taverns, in parish courtyards, in marketplaces near the river, people lower their voices when you arrive. They do not know exactly what you do. They know enough. You move through Seville with a different awareness now. You notice the rhythms of the city, the clerics near the cathedral, the merchants near the port, the crowded lanes around the old Jewish quarter, the workshops, the river traffic, the changing faces of the neighborhoods. You are asked to observe, to report, to confirm identities, to stand nearby when tensions rise. You are not an inquisitor. You are not a judge, but you are part of the court's reach. At times, you accompany clergy into homes where the matter is delicate and the outcome can go either way. Sometimes a person is frightened into honesty. Sometimes a misunderstanding is corrected. Sometimes a genuine fault is confessed and dealt with through penance and instruction. The point is not spectacle. The point is resolution. And resolution in Seville often arrives quietly. Level 5, the Consultor. By 43, you are seated at the table instead of standing beside it. The consultors are the learned men the tribunal relies on when the case requires theology, doctrine, and careful judgment. The room is stricter now. Seville is behind the walls, but you hear its life through the windows. Bells, carts, prayers, footsteps, the constant motion of a major city in an empire that stretches far beyond Andalusia. Here, in the chamber, the discussion is measured. A sentence from a sermon is examined. A book is evaluated. A witness's memory is compared with earlier notes. A priest asks whether a penitent's words show true repentance or merely fear. You are expected to be calm. You are expected to know the difference between correction and condemnation. That is the center of the institution's self-understanding. The accused person is not automatically treated as an enemy of God. The court exists because the church believes error matters, but also that the soul can return. That is why confession, instruction, and reconciliation are not side notes. They are central. You begin to see why this office was feared. Not because it was random, because it was structured. Level 6, the Inquisitorial Officer. At 52, you are given the authority to oversee hearings. This is where your life changes shape. You are not merely helping the process. You are responsible for it. The chamber is familiar now, but the faces are different. Accused persons stand where others once stood. Clerks write. Witnesses speak. Priests wait. The city remains outside, noisy and sunlit, while the tribunal holds to its own pace. Your job is to keep the process just, orderly, and faithful to the church's purpose. You ask questions carefully. You do not speak to humiliate. You speak to clarify. You ask whether the accused understands the doctrine at issue. You ask who instructed them. You ask whether they repented privately before being summoned. That balance is not easy. A man once comes before you pale and shaking, convinced he is already lost. You review the file and find that his offense was less malice than ignorance, sharpened by bad instruction and public rumor. He is corrected, instructed, and reconciled. Another case is more difficult. The evidence is stronger, the defiance more deliberate. There, the sentence is heavier. But even then, the language is solemn, not theatrical. The tribunal sees itself as safeguarding souls and order, not feeding on suffering. You are older now. You have seen enough to know that institutions live or die by the character of the people inside them. Level 7, the Senior Judge. At 61, you are one of the men others consult before a difficult decision. By now your name is known in Seville and beyond it. Not famous in the worldly sense. Known in the quiet sense. Known by priests, notaries, canons, and officials who need a steady hand when the case is complicated and the consequences matter. You have seen enough to distrust both panic and vanity. The tribunal is not a place for spectacle. It is a place for endurance. A senior judge must understand the church, the law, the local customs, and the limits of human certainty. You work with other officials over long sessions, reviewing documents from Seville, Cadiz, Córdoba, and the surrounding countryside. You hear appeals. You examine whether procedures were followed. You decide whether a matter must be escalated, corrected, or closed. Your authority has grown, but so has your burden. You sit beneath a crucifix and sign a decision that will alter a man's life. Then another. Then another. And the strange thing is this. The more authority you gain, the less room there is for ego. The office demands seriousness, or it collapses into injustice. Level 8, the Old Man. At 72, you no longer move as quickly as you once did. Your hands are slower. Your hearing is weaker. The young official stands straighter than you now. They ask you about old procedures, old cases, old mistakes. They want to know how Seville looked in the years before the riverworks changed the port traffic, how the court handled cases during lean seasons, how to tell fear from falsehood, silence from shame, and repentance from performance. You tell them what mattered most. Be exact. Be patient. Be fair. Do not confuse severity with holiness. Do not confuse leniency with mercy. Remember that the church judges because it believes truth has eternal consequences. You walk one last time near the cathedral quarter and hear the city at evening. The bells, the footsteps, the river beyond the streets. The life of Seville continues, larger than your career, larger than your office, larger than any tribunal. You think back to the day you first carried papers through the corridor as a boy. You knew nothing then. Now you understand enough to say this. The Spanish Inquisition was a grave institution of its time, formed to defend Catholic orthodoxy, preserve order, and correct error through a legal and religious process that, at its best, aimed at instruction and reconciliation as much as judgment. That does not make the work light. It makes it serious. And seriousness, in the end, was the price of the authority you spent a lifetime carrying.